Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast within the BeeGuard project. And it's a long time since last. Today, I'm sitting together with Steve Riley at a wine bar. Let's be very honest. And we have had now maybe 1 or 2 hours very nice conversations. And then I thought, let's make a podcast. We have just been to a big a conference with more than 150 people here in Switzerland, on a very beautiful place that they call Planterhof. And there we talked about varroa-tolerance, I always say varroa-tolerance, varroa resistance, possibilities, how to organize that kind of European-wide in a bottom-up approach, so to say. And one of the speakers were you, Steve. You made a very nice talk. I really loved it. I also need to tell everybody that I made a tour 2 weeks ago, I think, where I decided together with Patricia Aldera to make a tour to England because I wanted to have eye contact with beekeepers claiming that they have varroa tolerance. And I met them, and it was so impressive. And maybe doing this talk here, you can also hear that I'm a little bit confused because some of my dogmas in my beekeeping life, they have to be changed. And I can definitely say that we saw very, very nice bee colonies with varroa tolerance for 10, 15 years or something like that. And now, Steve, you're here and you made and I did visit you, of course, thanks a lot. And met your wife, and we were counting mites, and we were looking for cleaning behavior in your colonies and so on.
You did some hard work that day, Fleming. Thank you.
Yes, very nice.
I'm going to retire if I can get students like you coming through.
You should do that. I just want to say from the beginning, Steve, he made a very beautiful book. I love it, The Honeybee Solution to Varroa, where he's describing his whole story about that. But Steve, please present yourself. What are you doing, so to say, and how did it start?
Well, it starts, I think, like most beekeepers, with a complete fascination with the honeybee, and we've all fallen in love at different stages. And when we came involved, varroa had the upper hand for sure. But it was interesting that around the world, different places, including in different parts of the UK, there were Apis mellifera honeybees, which actually had gone on top of varroa. And so we were fascinated by that in particular. And we thought, well, if it's possible in different parts of our own country and different parts of the world, then why can't we do it? Mm-hmm. And so let's try and understand an approach of what to do. So we read just about every page on the internet and all the free access papers. Well done, the researchers, for that. And initially, particularly influenced by the USDA's work, which was way before what was going on in Europe, and I think a little bit overlooked actually in parts of Europe. So we learned a lot from them, and we were fortunate enough at the start of the project to meet Dr. Ralph Buchler, who was running a bee breeding institute in Kirchhain in Germany. Who helped us transition off what we were currently doing and overcoming that fear that most beekeepers have of stopping treatments. Like everyone else, Fleming, we had that mind block which said if you stop treating, your bees are going to die. And but we knew that wasn't the case everywhere, so we just needed a safe way just to move away from it. And we learned from Ralph a couple of biotechnical techniques, queen frame trapping and one-off brood removal, which would replace our summer treatments. And off we went with a group of us at the club at Western Beekeepers who were like-minded. And it was really important to work with other people because it was a slightly frightening prospect at the time. We were going to change something which most of beekeeping and mainstream beekeeping tells you not to do. And happily, that worked incredibly well. And both those techniques are really effective at reducing varroa. I remember emailing Ralph, who was very good to keep in touch with us the first year or the first winter after using, in particular.
Did you tell us what year we are in? What year?
This is 2018.
Yes.
Yeah. And he. And I wrote to him saying, this is remarkable. There's hardly any mites in the colony, because we were monitoring natural mite drop, on inserted varroa boards at the time. And I remember Ralph's reply, which was 2 words, which was German efficiency. And I'm sure he enjoyed that a lot. And it's still a good story. And so thank you to Ralph Buchler, who got us started.
Yeah.
We quickly realised that actually if you keep taking the problem away, the same as treating, you never really find which of your colonies have abilities with varroa. Which again, we took some advice from Ralph, which was to stop the winter treatments.
Yes.
So the winter treatments are incredibly effective, which is why they're so highly attractive to beekeepers in the old way of thinking. Mm-hmm. But the point is, if you take the problem away in the winter, in the spring, you really won't know which your colonies are coping or not. So if you take away that winter treatment, you then have 6 to 7 months from the previous either biotechnical treatment or your final ever miticide treatment. Yeah. And then in the spring, you will have a very good idea of which colonies are coping and which not. And why the spring? And that's because certainly in the southeast of England where we are, you get a really strong nectar flow, pollen availability, and therefore brood development. And when there's brood development, there is opportunities for varroa to reproduce. And so you will find out quickly which of your colonies are stopping that reproduction from taking place and which are not. And it very quickly became obvious that we had some colonies which actually are quite good with varroa and others which were completely hopeless.
And then what happened then? Because, when I was visiting your place, I was really looking for the tools that you're using. So how did you organize all this with your local club? I mean, you have a local club. How many beekeepers do you work together with?
Well, when we started, it was just 8 of us, right? And it's one of those things in a club. You'll have different views, and I'm sure this will resonate with everyone else at their own clubs. And there'll be some who will always treat for the rest of their lives, won't consider anything different, and others who are open to being interested in new techniques. And then there are people who actually find it a bit uncomfortable putting chemical miticides on honeybees. Yeah. And so those are the people you want to work with initially. Yeah. And then you need to prove the concept that it actually works. And that once you see that happening, or others in the club see that happening, people want to join it. Because no one really wants to put miticides on their bees. Once they think about it, they don't want to do that. But they are just a bit afraid to do anything different. And all the mainstream teaching is to carry on doing that. So in our first spring, when we were monitoring, whether you had this 6 to 7 months of the bees being with the varroa, it was quite obvious that some of the bees had no abilities at all. And there's a graph in the book which shows that the cumulative mite drop through that spring for one of the colonies was about 2,300 mites in 3 months. Yeah. It was quite remarkably high. Now, in the past, and this is a really key point, we would have done everything to have kept that colony alive. Yeah. We would have used drone culling, we would have dusted it with sugar, we would have used formic acid, everything that we would have, all the tools of the trade. And in doing so, we would have kept going a colony with very weak traits against varroa, which is why we still have a varroa problem today. Yeah. And we're doing that en masse, keeping the colonies going which can't cope with varroa. So instead of solving the varroa problem, we've actually been extending it. And that's down to beekeepers. It's not a criticism of beekeepers. We just haven't changed the course of the tanker quick enough. And it's, when you think about places like Cuba and South Africa, across the whole countries, they have varroa resistance. And it took them roughly 5 to 8 years with natural selection, which is a tough cookie. But here we are, 40 years later in Europe and over 30 years in the UK, and we still have a big varroa problem. And there's 2 parts to that, I think. One is we've not distinguished between colonies which can cope with varroa and those which cannot. So we're keeping the ones that cannot cope with varroa going, extends the problem. And also we've been buying non-resistant bees from bee suppliers, and that really needs to change.
I mean, just to give my comment on this, I have been working as beekeeper advisors for 30 years. I have been very much involved in the varroa treatment strategy in Denmark. And some years ago, I really... And the strategy was kill as many mites as you can, keep as many colonies alive as you can. And some years ago, I suddenly realized that I kept what I call the bad genes alive. So if we could kill, let's say, 8,000 mites, 10,000 mites in a bee colony, and it was alive next season, job done. Yeah. Fleming was proud.
Yeah.
Until I realized that what I did was actually that I kept the bad genes alive, the drones that will fly out next year, made with your, let's say, resistant new queens, and then I give those bad queens, bad genes into them. And in that way, we don't solve it. Yeah. So we should get much more down on beekeeper level, and beekeepers, they should do their share in keeping this up and doing this work.
Yeah, exactly. We've got stuck in this treatment cycle
where
we've kept the bees going with the wrong traits.
Exactly.
And then we've bred from them quite happily, you know, and we've been delighted to keep those bees alive, and then we've bred from them. So we need to sort of think about ourselves there a little bit, and let's not be too hard on miticides. They were the right solution to stabilize the beekeeping community. Yeah, you know, and they did a good job, I think, of just stopping losses and gave people a chance to move forward. But we somehow lost thinking about what was going on between the bees and the mites. We became real experts in the different miticide treatments at different times of the year. Did you do supers on, supers off, and did you need PPE to protect yourself? You know, whilst you were putting it on. You know, that was our expertise, and we'd forgotten about actually what was going on in the hive. And when you start down the varroa-resistant strategy and the different methods you can engage in, it's really exciting again, you know. And I remember the times when we sat around the table at Western Beekeepers, at the first sort of meeting we had at the Carpenter's Arms pub, and we said, look, this is the last time we're ever going to use miticides on our bees.
Okay.
And it felt really exciting, actually, because we became alive as beekeepers again. We thought, gosh, what are we going to do then? And we started really thinking about what was going to happen rather than just putting some chemicals on the bees. So it's fascinating to get involved and understand it. And now we have a framework, I think, where people can do.
You are definitely one of our first movers. But please give me an overview. How is the situation in England right now? I mean, you're not the only one, so to say. We have like Wales, which I did visit as well, and I visit 3 beekeepers there, and I'm rather impressed, I have to say. Tell us.
Well, I'm certainly not a first mover, okay, and our club is not a first mover. We're on the back of giants here, so on the shoulders of giants, rather. So the people who inspired us were like Ron Hoskins in the UK, who was doing selection work, also looking at the varroa board and looking for chewed out bits of pupa, which was the right thing to do, you know, and people like Clive and Sean Hudson up in Wales.
Exactly. I visit them, nice, very nice people.
Yeah, with sheep in their apiary, you know, running around. Pet sheep, really. Very naughty sheep they are. We visited about a month ago, and and they've just completed their 17th season of not treating. Right?
17. Yeah.
So, and they have normal beekeeping, so they're completely through varroa. They don't even think about it. They don't do any monitoring. You know, it's just back to pre-varroa days with normal sort of type of losses, and they care as much about varroa as they would do seeing a woodlouse or something. You know, it just so that's great to see, and that's been inspiring for us to know that it can happen, and it can happen in your own country, but it's also was happening in other places as well. So at the Varroa Resistance 2033 conference that we've just been to in Switzerland, there was Kurt Webster, who was one of in Vermont in US, who was one of the early pioneers, you know. And so he's not treated for 25 years. And he has a great book out all about it, and is a complete gentleman, you know, and deserves a massive pat on the back and respect of beekeepers for just leading the way. And it was a pleasure talking to him, but actually understanding a little bit about the techniques that he went through. So he was able to piggyback a little bit on the back of some special imports that came into the USDA. So USDA was given money by Congress to solve the varroa problem.
Was it the Primorsky bees? Or what
It was the Primorsky bees,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
So the Primorsky bees are Apis mellifera subspecies, which were already resistant to varroa. There was a special license required to allow them to import the bees, which the imports, I think, stopped in 1933, I think it was, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So they were able to test these Russian bees, and the USDA gave them out to beekeepers who could show they had at least 100 colonies, which Kirk Webster did have at the time. So he was able to test and work with these Russian bees, which was the founding stock for what became one of the earliest varroa-resistant large beekeeper events in the USA, but also around the world, actually, for Apis mellifera.
I mean, we did listen to his talk yesterday. He's a very nice person, and it was a very nice, I would say, very nice storytelling about the whole background, how it started, but also the life attitude, so to say. I think that's very important. Organic, he didn't want to treat, and they took the consequences of what they did, and respect, really, I have to say.
Yeah, and it is in any walk of life. Actually, some people you find who have the mental strength to be independently minded and do what they think is the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's worked, and it was very much against the onrushing crowd who said you must do the opposite, and so he was. So huge credit to him and others who were very early in this game. So we're late. We're fairly late to it, really, and have learnt from others. What we've tried to do is to show that people working together as clubs can do this, and to create a framework which is a simple one, where you actually you take back control of all your beekeeping, and you can run sustainable apiaries. You create your own queens. You're selecting for varroa-resistant traits in a very simple way, and that becomes a virtuous cycle. You start breeding from the right bees again. And the other thing that happens is that when you're treating in this sort of treatment trap cycle, you get the bees gradually become more and more resilient. The mites rather become more and more resilient to the treatments, and we've seen that with some of the early treatments like Apistan and Beverol, which were overused. We've seen it more recently with Amitraz. But you're effectively selecting for the tough mites. So you never kill 100%. You might kill 90. So the 10% that survive is the new breeding stock.
Yeah.
So you're breeding from the weaker bees, and you're selecting for tough mites. That's not a good recipe. And we're seeing that in big losses, I think, in different parts of the world.
And this is really the point where I'm at the moment, that I realized that this is what I have promoted over many years, and we need to change and we need to improve. Like in Denmark, I have to say we had to introduce one treatment more, just to be sure that we could bring it over the rounds. But please give me your recipe. What are you actually doing in your colonies? And I had the luck to be in your beautiful garden, and you gave me good instruction on what to do. So how are you doing? The simple recipe.
So firstly, this is a bee-led solution.
Yeah.
So this is not something that we are being particularly clever about, and we haven't come up. It's not a human-imposed solution. This is something in nature that we've effectively copied, and what we've done is to understand what the traits are of bees that cope with varroa, which are naturally resistant over a long period of time, and there's been long-term research on them. So the first thing we look for is this investigation that bees have of finding varroa-infested cells, and that typically is seen in sort of almost roundish clusters, and it could be 10 or 15 different open cells, and it's those little white faces with the pink to purple eyes at the pink to purple eyed stage, which indicates that this is a varroa investigation. We'll come back to why pink to purple-eyed stage is important, but that's the first thing to be able to look for, and it's a very good hygienic trait, but isn't the solution. So the solution actually is the removal at that pink to purple-eyed stage of the pupa, and in doing so, it stops the sons and the daughters which have been laid at this stage from mating, so passing on the sperm from the son to the daughter, which is their reproduction process. Rather unpleasant though it is in a wine bar here in Zurich to think about, but and so that doesn't happen. So you lose all that reproductive growth that you see on the graphs of massive growth in mites. The second thing that happens when that pupa is removed is that these are very immature soft body mites, and they all die. So the current reproduction, which is just being laid by the mother mite, is lost as well. So two benefits there. But the third benefit is that the mother mite, who usually escapes, she's very agile and adept at clambering around bees, and that's how they've evolved. She's lost one of her 2 to 3 reproductive opportunities. So typically they only mate 2 to 3 times. In the lab you can see they can make more, but that's typically what they'll do. And in varroa-resistant colonies you'll see almost up to 45 to 50% of the mother mites are infertile. So this interruption process has absolutely stopped the growth, so you don't get that big increase in mites. You get this sort of bobbling along effect from January, when our first worker brood is there, all the way through to about November, with a bit of a spike which you see in late autumn, which perhaps we can talk about. But excuse me. So, that's it in a nutshell. So understanding the biology behind it leads you to think about, well, how do we monitor for this in the way that we all can? So, and this is something that we teach at our training apiary to new beekeepers, so they have an understanding of it, and everyone can grasp it, which is great, I think. And so firstly, you see the uncapping at the pink to purple eye stage. Once you start seeing it, and in fact, when we're presenting on this, we always ask that question, and everyone nods away. We never understood it in the past, Fleming. We thought it was called bold brood in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by the way, I have to rewrite my bee disease leaflet.
But none of us did, and so there's no criticism implied. No. But the recommendation was to requeen. You think, gosh, we were getting that wrong, weren't we? And when we look back at our very old beekeeping notes, even when we were treating, we were seeing this. So we just didn't understand it at the time, but we do now. So the first thing the beekeeper, and make a note of that. So in your hive record cards, make a note of uncapping. There's your investigation stage. On the varroa boards underneath an open mesh floor, you will get to see not just the mite drop, but you'll get to see chewed out pupal parts. And there's your indication that the the infested pupa has been removed. Now, we know from the science that in resistant colonies in places like Cuba, South Africa, Hawaii, the resistant bees take out 60 to 80% of infested pupa. But in treated mite-susceptible colonies, they only take out about 20%.
Yeah, okay.
So the science has shown that works as well. Yeah. So we get to see on those boards the full completion of what the bees are doing to keep on top of their mite levels. And then the third part of that is to see a low level of mites.
Yeah.
And that corroborates that there's sufficient hygienic behaviour going on to keep the mite levels down. If your mite levels are massive still, then clearly the bees do not have enough hygienic behaviour.
So what we are doing now is, just to wrap up, we count the mites. How often should we count the mites on the insert, natural mite fall?
Yeah.
How often?
That's a good question. So it depends on how much access.
You do it once a week?
I do it twice a week.
You do it twice a week. Okay.
I do it twice a week. And I think that when you first start, it's worth really investing some time. Yeah. This is what we're doing here. We're re-engaging in the mite and honeybee issue, rather than just understanding which miticides put on. So invest some time in understanding which colonies have the abilities, and you'll probably find them. And you'll also find those that do not as well. So choose an apiary where it's close to get to.
Exactly.
And twice a week is fantastic. Once a week is okay as well. And just really engage it. And you can do this. This is winter beekeeping. You can start, okay? So you start in January. And you've got rid of your families at Christmas and New Year parties are over, your headache's gone. And you're back down in your apiary because you're missing your bees already. And you don't really want to go into the shed and start doing all the cleaning that you have to do. It's on your mind. Go and do some beekeeping. Have a look at those boards. And you will see on the varroa-resistant colonies already chewing out bits of pupa. And you will once you see that, you know that firstly they're on top of their varroa growth. So you're not going to see this massive increase because they're stopping it from the start of the year. But also that about 13 to 14 days earlier, you had a laying queen. So it's a great start to the year and you're back doing some beekeeping.
So you could really say that the headline is actually know your mite falls. Learn your mite falls in your apiary. Don't count once a year, but count often.
Yeah, invest in understanding the abilities of your colonies. It's really fascinating as well, and it's exciting. As we all get a bit overexcited with bee behaviours, but this is a really interesting one. So we know the biology and we know how to monitor for it. But I would not just the mites, see the pupal parts as well. I think that completes the whole process and the understanding.
But for you, it was also very important that when we counted at your place, that we see those white pupae antennae that they have been chewed out, and that's enough for you to kind of conclude that there is this hygienic behavior in the bee colony.
Yes, but sometimes you see bits of the pink to purple eye as well. So you know the timing.
I saw them on one of your pictures today, actually.
Exactly, we show that, and it nails the timing, Fleming, and it gives you the confidence because people say, well, how do you know that pupa chew actually is to do with varroa? But it's once you understand the whole process and you see it regularly. So in most of my varroa-resistant colonies, you will see this on a regular basis. So you build up a knowledge over a period of months. And by the time your beekeeping starts in the spring, you already have a pretty good idea what your likely varroa-resistant winners are. And let's be really clear on this. You're investing in a hygienic behavior in your colonies. Right? It isn't just about varroa. This is bees looking after a problem. And that's always going to be a good quality. Whatever happens in the future with bees and things and other pests and pathogens hit us, having a hygienic behavior is a good thing.
But for me, it's very important now to find out what are you doing actually in the springtime. What are you looking for when you're evaluating your colonies? Because you talk about it's very important for you to have a look at the colonies in the springtime. First of all, are they alive? That's a very good breeding parameter, so to say.
That helps, yes, indeed, yes. So the spring, certainly where we are in the UK, there's new brood that starts in January, and it will go right through to really strongly through to April, May, and June, and you'll get to a full brew box, in that time. But that's the opportunity that varroa have to reproduce. So, and that's when you'll know if they've had 3 months of opportunity to reproduce. If the mite levels have gone up, then you'll know that the bees do not have the right skill set that you're looking for. And so those are queens that you need to take out and requeen. Either give them away to someone you don't like who lives a long way away. You shouldn't be laughing at that point, Fleming.
No, I did not.
But they need to come out. So nature would have naturally taken those queens out at some point, but we've been keeping them going for too long. So requeen those. Be really proactive about it, and keep your best ones and requeen with your best. So, and that's the great opportunity to do it is the spring, because you'll have had that opportunity to do the monitoring properly. And I just wanted to say, look, the battleground here is in worker brood. We all sort of know that the drone brood is where varroa will naturally go to. Yeah. And that's where they've evolved to go to in Asia, which is interesting, and maybe we'll come back to that. But the battleground is in worker brood in Apis mellifera in the west. So when varroa arrived from Asia, they couldn't believe their luck that they could breed in worker brood and in drone brood.
Free buffet.
Yes, and but unfortunately, the parasite kills the host, which is not what they intend to do.
Does not make sense at all.
So the equilibrium is that they'll probably get back to just breeding in seasonal drone brood, which will be fine for our colonies, and no one will have any concerns about that at all. So when people talk to you about, well, won't varroa adapt as well as the bees, and just take on the bees? So, well, the adaptation might be in our favour actually, but they'll hold off until drone brood arrives, which is sort of what happens in Asia. And it's not quite as straightforward as that, but that could be happening. So what we've just seen this year is the lowest level of mites we've ever come across, and not just in the research apiary, but in the breeding apiary and others. And so it does seem, after a period of years of selection, the bees will actually get on top of the mites, and they're at a very, very low level. So, which is exciting, But it's also bee-led as well. I think that's the really key thing. Okay, so we're not doing anything special here apart from just monitoring the framework that we've talked about, and the rest is led by the bees. So it's totally sustainable, and that's what we think is exciting.
So you need to explain me now, because I want to copy paste you. How did you start? I mean, you got the idea. Now I don't want to treat anymore. Did you already there at that time see a certain level of resistance, or how did you? I mean, did you lose all your colonies at the year one, or was there just one left, or you need to? Yeah, because I'm very curious about the beginning.
Yeah, the beginning was full of fear.
Yes.
Okay, because you're taking on something which in all your beekeeping career you've never even contemplated, so stopping treating. So we did, as we explained, we went down this cautious route, which helped us enormously. Okay, but it was a different time. Okay, 2018, and when we were thinking about it the year before. So that was our process initially, and we were also learning as we went. Okay, so we know a lot more now, and a lot more confident about the traits now, and I wish we had that knowledge back in 2017,
so
2018.
You make your mistakes as well.
Of course you do. So, but because we were monitoring for mite counts, the mistakes actually were understanding the whole process, the biology of the process. Because initially we thought that uncapping, and that was what the science was, uncapping was key. It would change the temperature and the humidity, and it would stop the varroa from reproducing. We now know that isn't the case. And actually, if the humidity and temperature is kept at about the right level across that brood, then everything hatches okay, and the varroa carry on reproducing. So that was one of our early misunderstandings. But there's still the mite drop they were monitoring would have told us which of the colonies were the potential stars and which were not. So we sort of covered ourselves there in a way with a bit of luck. But that was okay, because we were still doing the proper job, but without understanding the full implications of what was happening within the darkness of the hive. But with other monitoring, like we did the 24-hour test of the pictures of the brood, it just showed us the level of hygienic behaviour that was going on within the colonies, where we took a picture of the same piece of brood 24 hours later, and again we've shown that in the book.
Yeah, exactly, it's very nicely illustrated in the book. Yeah,
and it was remarkable, but we never appreciated this previously, because firstly we weren't aware of what was going on, the hygienic behaviour, but secondly, from 1 week to the next, or 2 to 3 weeks after you do your next inspection, you never see it because the lot has changed. So we'd recommend that as something if you start to see uncapping. If it's a nice colony, this was done in the spring, so the colony has enough time to get over the stress of idiot beekeeper appearing again and looking at them. But that was really illuminating, right? And it taught us a lot about what was happening. And when we look back now and our old hive records, it does seem there were the right signs of varroa resistance. So let's just talk about that, because we mentioned this in the conference yesterday.
Exactly,
in Europe, you've had varroa for 40 years.
Yeah.
And where bees have been allowed to adapt, there's been normal local bees used, and people have used their own bees rather than bring in newbies all the time, there will be a level of adaptation that's already taken place, but we don't appreciate how to find it, or we haven't appreciated it in the past. There's also a background of feral colonies, free-living colonies, which which I think everyone knows one or two. All beekeepers you talk to, they seem to know some, either in trees or old buildings, which survive, and they know they've survived in the early spring, and you see them flying again. And these are typically very resistant bees, that they've been exposed to natural selection, and they're already, it's a shortcut to doing all the work that we've talked about. And actually that has been the basis of quite a few of the case studies on the varroa-resistant.uk website, where people have started, even small businesses, been started from a feral colony they were looking at was surviving every year in a chimney. That was Grace Evans at Fen Apiaries, and she runs 100 colonies now, commercially. And also the foragers and honeybee company just found there were some bees surviving in an old building, and it was they started their project that way. So they're a great source of varroa-resistant bees.
Maybe you should make a little bit of advertisement for the homepage you just talked about, the British varroa-tolerance. I even don't remember the name of the address now. What is the address?
It's www.varroa-resistant.uk.
Okay, very straightforward.
Yeah. And it was led by Professor Stephen Martin, who's really been a sort of global consultant on varroa resistance. He's worked around the UK, obviously, but also in Mexico, in Hawaii, Cuba, South Africa, and has been invited around different parts of Europe. So he's got a real global approach. So he leads on all the science there. But I thought the important thing when we first got together, our first meeting, from his perspective, was actually to work with beekeepers. And then you get a proper challenge and practical inputs and pushback and ideas. And as he said, you don't get people to think about varroa resistance by waving research papers at them, which is absolutely right. And it's the same with waving research papers at honeybees. They just doesn't work. So you need beekeepers involved doing the monitoring. Your bees the best. Someone else can't tell you how they're doing. You know them the best. And so we work with Rona Toft, who runs a small commercial business.
Yes.
And
I met her.
You met her. Super.
Very nice.
Yeah, her and Richard. And again, great inspiration. And they run some training sessions for the highest UK qualification, called the National Diploma of Beekeeping. And the beekeepers who come there are already master beekeepers, and then they get told at the end of their weekend training or week's training that they've just been working with bees which haven't been treated for about 14 years.
Yes, exactly.
And none of them can believe it, but it makes a big impact on them, and hopefully they go back as senior educators around the UK and pass that on, or it opens them up to thinking about it. The other beekeeper, including myself, is a chap called Joe Ibbotson.
Yeah.
Joe monitors bees in the Boughton Estate in the Midlands of England, and he monitors around about 90 free-living colonies in trees in ancient woodland.
Oh, shit happens.
So, isn't that wonderful? So he's watching them, learning from them, and he also catches swarms from them. So, and he puts those into national hives, and so he's able to observe them, and he sees exactly the same traits that we've talked about in the book. So that's, if you ever want sort of confirmation that this is a really natural process that we're just trying to copy, I think that's it. So the four of us have worked together on the website, and it gets an awful lot of viewings, and increasingly international as well. So I hope it's a good resource for people. There's no commercial value to us. There's no income being generated. It's just for science and education only.
I need to say it's a great homepage, and it's really worthwhile spending some hours on the homepage to read all the recommendations and so. I'm jumping. The queens.
Yeah.
How do you make them? Where do you get them from? Local races, imported races? I mean, please speculate and tell me a little bit about this. Because the queen is the queen of the colony, so to say.
Yes. Yeah. And it's been interesting at the conference we've just been to. There's an awful lot of very specialist queen breeding.
Yeah.
We don't have any truck with that, I'm afraid. So our interest is in bees which are adapted to local environments. of where you are. And we know certainly in the UK, and I'm sure it's exactly the same throughout parts of Europe, North America, is that bees get used to their microclimate. So you went and visited in northwest Wales, and it's wet and windy up there.
It is.
And they have...
And beautiful.
Yeah, and beautiful, yeah. And they have the Apis mellifera, the dark bee, which is really suited to that area,
Really dark.
and has been forever. So don't use anything else. And the same in Scotland, it's colder and not as sunny overall. So you different bees for different parts of the UK, and our interest is just using the local bee. So suited to the microclimate, used to the patterns of flora and pollen availability, and probably used also to the local pathogens as well. Some of which we never are able to observe because they never become an issue. So we use local bees only. We try to stop bees coming into the area so we don't get that sort of ripple of throwing a pebble into a pond, that genetic ripple, which we don't need, and often bringing in bees which are non-resistant, which just won't cope, which we don't want that. So we try to set up ourselves so that we rear our own queens, but in a really simple way. In a way that actually, I mean, everyone can do, but it's we call them bees' choice queens, which is something we got from Sam Comfort from Anarchy Apiaries. Thank you, Sam. And it was his term. And there's something about bees choosing their own queen, which we probably don't know anything about, and it'd be interesting to try and find out. There's been a bit of research on royal patrolines and things, but it's difficult to know. But they probably know something that we don't know. So we did try grafting our own queens initially, but we just found that quite a lot of them were superseded early. Might have been our skill set, but we just came to a view, actually, that maybe we don't choose the best queens, because all we're selecting there is the smallest larva we can get out of a cell and into another cell. And secondly, maybe we damage that little larva a little bit, but don't know about it. And sometimes the bees won't raise a queen if you have damage, but sometimes they might do, because you're putting that larva into an emergency situation where they don't have a queen.
Yeah.
And finally, potentially you lose a day of that larva being nurtured as a queen. So there's 5 days roughly before that cell's going to be sealed. And if you've lost a day, there's 20%. So there were a number of reasons we thought maybe that's the reason why these queens are superseded. And superseded is nothing more. If it's a late superseded, it's nothing more frustrating. You find out in the spring, horrible. So we came to a view that actually we'd go for bees' choice, so that we have a system where when the bees look to swarm, we allow them to, we take the queen out and we put her into a nuke. We call it a nuke artificial swarm over here. And it's one of those rare moments in beekeeping where you're sort of in control of a swarm situation. And then you can walk away for a week, and she's in a nuke with a few frames of bees, and back at the main colony. It's a very strong colony, a huge amount of bees in it. They start making all the queen cells that they need, and so you might have 10 to 15 decent queen cells when you go back a week later. We use those if we like the genetics of resistant colony, and we'll cut those out. The ones you can't always cut them all out. They're either on the wire or next to the wood. But the ones you can cut out, we cut out and we pop them into a roller cage, which then goes into an incubator at 34.5 degrees with a little bit of humidity, 67% humidity, and so that gives us a steady supply of virgin queens.
Exactly.
And incredibly simply, okay. So people talk about bee breeding. I think this is far more effective because it's involving the bee's decision-making process, and I think that's a good thing. So it takes us out of the equation. We have this natural arrogance, I think, as beekeepers and as leaders of the world and human race, that we think we can do a better job. Maybe we can't, So we've used the bees' expertise here as well as sorting out the varroa, but also for raising the queens as well. So we have this supply of queens. We then use them in nukes. Or we can extend them to other members, offer them to other members of the club.
Give away.
Yeah, exactly. So which is in our interest as well, and the club. There's a huge demand for them, and increasing demand from outside the club as well, which is interesting.
So we're really on natural selection, so to say.
close to. It's not perfect. So in natural selection, the queens would have fought it out, and one would have gone forward, and a couple may have done car swarms. So, but it's closer to. Okay.
So what I would say is spread your semen as good as you can. I'm the drone semen in the local area, just to get this tolerance spread, or the resistance as much spread as possible.
Yeah. So we use open mating, which again the
it's
breeders
open mating. Yeah, there we got it.
The breeders won't have that. So it's which is interesting, So and it works. And it's worked from day one, which is interesting. When we sometimes have to look back a bit and see what worked and try and work out why. And when we started the project, there's no way that we had local drone and congregation areas with varroa-resistant drones in. Right, so it's interesting to us. Well, why were those queens able to carry resistance forward? Because they do. You just breed from the daughters, the granddaughters, and that's all we're doing here. Okay, so nothing over clever, and something that everyone can do. And but then the drones are flying, and maybe in due course they start to add some of their genetics. But it's raised with us a sort of interesting question of what is the role on varroa resistance. We've all made a natural assumption that they're half the genetics, so they're incredibly important. But maybe there's something else going on, and we'd love to understand that. And we don't need to understand it, but it's just the fascination has hooked us in. And so we're trying to commission some research with universities on what is the role of the drone with varroa resistance. And it could be it's 100%, which is fine, but it could be it's a lower number. And how does that work with something within the queens? Why is varroa resistance being passed down the queen line, which we very strongly see in all of our colonies, across the project. So just the curiosity is killing us. So we're going to try and get some work done on that. But open mating seems to work very well. And we were excited to see that John Harbaugh, who's sort of the godfather of VSHBs, and used to head up the USDA's project on this, has done a huge amount of fantastic educational work in the bee world. Is now he used to use instrumental insemination for his drones, and from his drones, and is now working on VSH with open mating, which really is the final solution. It's where we all want to get to, and where we've got to, and other case studies in the UK and other varroa resistant areas have got to. So very interesting times.
It is very interesting. One of the last things that I need to know from you, are you working with any kind of threshold when you are counting your mites? Do you have a threshold that you kind of say, okay, now I need to do a treatment, or I need to replace the queen, or where is the threshold in your system? The
threshold, yeah. So we have this is very broad, okay? So we always used to get this question, and we never knew how to answer it.
Yeah, but we want to know.
No, that's fine. So we did two things. One, we came up with we think is a reasonable guide, and it has to be just a guide, okay? Which was for varroa-resistant colonies, we like to see 5 a day or under across a year, and then we see 10 a day across a year as something that needs requeening, and we would look to requeen there, because clearly there's not enough hygienic behaviour against the bees going on there. So requeen those, and then in the middle we have that thing called beekeeper judgment, which is always difficult.
No, we call it fingertip, the fingertip feeling, isn't it? Which I think is very important in all aspects of beekeeping, is your experience and your feelings, how it is, and also very often go for it.
Yeah, and you can't tell beekeepers, I think you can't tell them, beekeepers, how healthy their colonies are. Only they will know. So everyone who's close to their bees will know that. So but the other question was, you see volatility on mite drop through the course of the year.
Yes,
right? So what we did was to publish a full year's analysis of the mite drop, which we published in the book, so that people can see what a typical pattern is for all of the colonies that we saw. Right? And there's a particular feature towards the end of the year where there's a big spike in the mite drop, which made us pretty afraid at the time, because we never understood it, and research had never covered it. So we talk about the pre-winter clean out, And there's some good reasons for it, but it's something to be aware of, And in the example we had, there was 661 mites, which
it was a lot.
And it's, you look at the mite pattern for the year, and it's just a huge spike. And to understand it took us a bit of time, And we thought initially we had that emotional reaction because it was early days. I think, well, this is a goner, but actually that is a varroa-resistant colony, and was bubbling out of the crown boards in the spring. And it was typical of a lot of the colonies at the time. So, so do you want to just talk about that? So,
yeah, of course.
Okay. So the spike that you see, and you'll see it in the book, is caused, we think, by a sort of slight build-up in mites, which happens during the strongest part of the nectar flow, and what happens then is that the colony, which is focused on winter stores from the summer flow, goes into honey factory mode, and it has to prioritise getting the honey or getting the nectar in, making the honey, and so all hands on deck are sorting out the honey, putting the stores, processing it, enzymes, putting the wax on, job done. And you walk into the apiary. We all know this as beekeepers. You walk into the apiary at that time of year, and the smell is fantastic, and you can hear the background humming of the work that's going on there. So we see less hygienic behaviour at that time. So because we monitor for a bit of uncapping and not too much during the flow, because we know we're past that swarming period, so we don't go in too often there. But you'll see it on the boards. There's less pupal bits that come through at that time of year. So we've made that assumption that there's a focus on honey production, and quite rightly so, and it feels that's common sense to us. But at the same time, the amount of brood is falling away as we go into winter. So from August through to November, it's going from like 6 or 7 frames of brood right down to perhaps 1 frame of brood in November. And that brood is creating more problems for the mites because they've got nowhere to go. And there's been a bit of a pickup in mites because of the nectar flow and less hygienic behaviour. And then they are looking to reproduce still, but there's less opportunities. So you'll find them having multiple foundress mites going into the same cell. You can get 2, 3 or 4 going in. And these are easy to find for the detector bees, the sniffer bees. So we see a lot of hygienic behaviour there, and a lot of cleaning out of mites. And I think it was all around that sort of recipe and calculation as why there was over 600 mites dropping, and that's your time of your winter bees. And the next question we came, well, that's still a lot of mites, isn't it? And the knee-jerk reaction is, you've got a treat, haven't you? But actually, when you step back and think about the frames of winter bees, there were from August through to November, we calculated that there was round about 20,000 winter bees produced around there, and it could be 18 or 22,000 bees, but that's 661 in context of that is under 3%. So it's a smallish number which the bees can cope with absolutely fine. So we've sort of uncovered that as a pattern, because the scientists never looked at mite drop because it's too much like hard work for them, I think. And so they used sampling methods, which was fine, and they worked really well most of the year. But this was a new feature, and we've been really glad to share that.
Yeah, it's really very interesting. I need to look on there. We are talking. It's great. For about 1 hour now, okay. So I think maybe we should wrap off, because podcast listener, they are not. We cannot keep them so much. So what is your last message in this interview here now? This conversation that we have.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, that was nice.
And thank you for the wine as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not paid yet.
I'd say. I think. It's about understanding what bees are capable of.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, this is a honeybee solution to varroa. People haven't thought it possible, but it is. And so start monitoring your bees for the traits that we've talked about, and start selecting for those which have these abilities. It's a hygienic trait, after all. It's always going to be good for your bees, and it works. Okay, so we've got 160 plus colonies in the project now, having started with 28 back in 2018, and there's lots of projects going on around the UK. And from the conference we've just been to, there's going to be lots of projects, particularly in Switzerland, starting up. So exciting times. Our knowledge has gone up a huge step, I think, as beekeepers, and we can take back control of a problem that we've given away really to chemical miticides, and in effect have extended the problem. So there's a solution in sight, and I want to leave that really positive and optimistic message for beekeepers.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an exciting journey, and you started many years ago, but I think in Europe or on the mainland, this journey has just slowly started now. And this is going to be very, very exciting within the next 10 years, 20 years. And I'm sure we can get there. And this is the point. And you said, don't fear. That was really what you said. So go for it.
Fleming, I'm giving you 3 to 5 years, okay?
3 to 5 years? Oh,
that's it. You've got this.
Yeah.
Start your monitoring.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I already do. So thanks a lot. It was really exciting. Thanks for this talk. And I wish you good luck. And I will start making my tolerant or resistant bees next year. I already started this year. I'm counting a lot. So thank you a lot.
Thanks, Fleming. Thank
See
you.
you. Thanks.